Hey, what's up, guys? Ron Harris here on my channel, Ron Harris Muscle. I realized it's late November, and that's kind of an anniversary for me. It was late November 1996 when I first began using steroids. So it's been 28 years. Wow, it's a long time. And for most of that time, I was using steroids with some very brief off time. So lately, I've been giving a lot of thought to maybe I should have stayed natural. Obviously, I can't go back in time, I can't change the past. But for those of you out there sort of struggling with the question, you have to make that personal decision as a responsible adult. I hope I'm not addressing kids here. Should I or should I not use steroids? And I know it's going to sound hypocritical of me, but I want to run through the reasons, the main reasons why you're better off staying natural. And most of these, all of these, I've lived through, and I have a lot of experience on this. So let's start with the first one. Permanent gains. If you stay natural, all the muscle you gain, assuming you continue to train and eat, are going to stay on you. You're keeping. They're yours to keep. They're yours forever. Unlike gains you make on steroids, a certain part of that you lose when you go off steroids. It's different for everybody. Some people keep the majority of their gains when they go off steroids, as long as they keep training hard. A lot of people lose about half. Some people lose way more than half. And of course, if you quit training and quit eating like a bodybuilder and go off steroids, poof, it won't be long before it looks like you never even touched a weight. But the good thing is you never have to worry about losing some of your gains when you go off because you were never on in the first place. So permanent gains, very, very compelling reason to stay natural. You know that everything you build is yours to keep. It's not, as I like to say sometimes, rented. Yes, you work hard for all gains, whether they're assisted chemically or not. But the fact of the matter is, when you're on steroids, some of that muscle mass you carry is only there because of the drugs, regardless of how hard you're training, because you take the drugs away and you're going to lose part of that muscle mass. Reason number two, this is very compelling. Although to young guys, it's an abstract concept, especially longevity, because you're thinking, I'm going to live forever anyway. I'm going to live to be like 10,000 years old. So what does it matter? But as you get older and you start seeing people around you get sick and die, you start realizing, I am mortal. I'm not immortal. I'm not Superman. I can get sick. I can die. It can happen. I will die. You're all going to die eventually. We all will. So there are healthier ways to use steroids. If you pay attention to your health, you work with doctors and you get regular blood work. You do all kinds of checkups on your heart, ultrasound, EKGs, stress tests, coronary calcium scores, things of that nature, and working with a doctor to use other drugs that will offset the negative effects of steroids. However, there is no debate here. If you stay natural versus if you cycle drugs for many, many years, especially in the amounts that most bodybuilders do, they're not using little baby doses. They're using a gram, 2-3 grams a week most of the year for years and years. There's no way you can look me in the eye with a straight face and say, I would be just as healthy and live just as long had I never touched a steroid as I would with all these years of steroid abuse. Because the way we bodybuilders use steroids, it's not in a therapeutic way. It's not at a TRT dose. It's much greater than that. So it's abuse. So you want to live healthier, you want to live longer, stay natural. I can pretty much guarantee you're going to live longer. I'm not going to live as long as I would have. I don't know how long I have to live regardless, but I'm pretty confident in saying that I won't live as long as I would have had I never touched a steroid. I'm fully convinced of that, and it's my life, and I've made my bed, and now I have to lie in it. So let's move on to number three, pride and accomplishment. I used to get really mad as a gear user when people would attribute all of my gains, all of my results, all of my physique to steroids. When I said, you know what, the steroids didn't get up at 5 a.m. to do the cardio when I was prepping. The steroids didn't go to the gym and lift all those weights for me. They didn't cook all that food and eat 6 times a day, every damn day. They didn't make sure I got to bed by 10 o'clock every night, so I got 8 hours of sleep. I did that. That was me. However, still, any steroid user, you never know how much of the gains you can attribute to steroids. They certainly helped you because you were natural and you were a certain size. Then you took the steroids and you grew and you became a bigger size. But you never know. How much of that did I accomplish through my hard work? how much are the drugs really responsible? The only way you ever know is when you eventually go off steroids for good. And, you know, assuming you're probably going to have to go on TRT, of course, because you've ruined your body's natural ability to produce testosterone after years of steroid use. Anybody's going to do that. Then you see exactly, well, this is how much muscle I really had that was permanent muscle. And it should be said that if you train naturally for years, and I trained from age 13, 14, I'll say 14, because by that time I was very regular with my training, 14 to 27 without using steroids. So 13 solid years of training. I built a good base of natural muscle. You know, I can show you a couple quick pictures of when I was natural. Just so you see that I'm not complete schmuck here. I'm not going to bore you with too many pictures, but here we go. So the thumbnail picture, this was 1990. I was 20 years old here, about to turn 21 a couple months later. That was 1995. That was the last year I competed as a drug-free athlete. So the end of the next year, November of 96. This was July of 95. November of 96, I would start steroids, but this is the best I ever looked natural. That was not natural. That was not natural. I got to go back. I mixed up this whole the natty and non-natty pictures in one album called Old School. That was 95. That was 95 right there, July 95. I had a much smaller waist. My midsection grew, not from growth hormone or insulin, which I never used in my many years. I used insulin once a few years ago. Growth hormone I didn't start using until a couple of years ago. My waist just got bigger from just trying to put on overall mass. It wasn't anything strange like that. Just a couple more natty run pictures to show you what my natural physique did look like, and in some ways I think it was better than my unnatural physique. Nope, that's not natural. What am I saying? That's not a natural. I got mixed up there, guys. My bad. Here we go. This is a collage of 1995, July 95. I used to get into really good condition naturally. I was 181 pounds at the contest that I'd competed about a week after. So here I'm probably about 185, something like that at 5'8". Not a huge guy, I know. This was that same show, 1995, 25 years old, 181 pounds. I had a really good taper, good structure, good quads, good chest. Arms were never great. Thing is, my arms never grew that much from steroids. Everything else did. This was 93, February of 93. I'm 23 years old here in the Natural Mr. Los Angeles contest. All right, I'm done with the pictures, guys. I'm done with the pictures. I want to get back to this. So I was very proud of my accomplishment then because I knew I did it all with no chemicals. And believe me, I'm not saying you can't take pride in your physique, even if you did build it with chemical enhancements, because you did put in the work. But a certain amount of that muscularity, that size, especially that we're seeing, it's due to the drugs. Reason number 4, hopefully the economy is going to turn around soon, but drugs can get very expensive, especially if you're using a lot of growth hormone every day. I hear people saying, you should use 20 IUs of growth hormone a day, which is a lot of growth hormone. Even if you're using generic, you're going to be spending a lot of money. Steroids themselves, the basics aren't that expensive. Once you start getting into more of the contest prep type of steroids, things like Anavar, Primobolan, those are going to be a lot more expensive. Anavar pills are probably 5 times more expensive than Dianabol pills. So there's a minor point, but still, it's a reality. A lot of people out there, a lot of us aren't wealthy. So do you really want to make that investment all the time? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. This is another one that some of you won't care. Obey the law. If you're not using steroids, you never have to worry. There were many times over the years when I was buying steroids where I was really worried, scared, because I'm not a criminal. I mean, I get nervous around police even when I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just one of those people. I was never meant to be a criminal. So a horrible criminal is what I would have been. So there were times like once I ordered from UK. I had ordered from the same website before, 2 or 3 times. This was in the early 2000s. And then I got a letter from customs said, come on down and get your package. And I never did because they would have arrested me and that would have been a bad deal. So that's one thing. Ordering through the mail is dangerous. Rick Collins wrote a great book called Legal Muscle, talks all about it, about the laws as they pertain to steroids. And things are getting a little better sometimes, but you still hear about steroid busts. Every time you buy steroids, you're at risk because you never know if the person you're buying from, they got caught and they're cooperating with law enforcement authorities to just bring in more people to save themselves, or they're trying to get to a bigger dealer or something. It's illegal without a doctor's prescription. It's a minor point. Do I feel they should be illegal for responsible adults? I do not. I mean, we can get things like Botox, cheek fillers, breast implants, butt implants. You can have surgery to look like a cat. You can get horns put in legally. You can do all those things. And to be very politically incorrect, you can be a male and take all kinds of female hormones to turn into a female, and that's okay. But if a man wants to use steroids to look and feel better, that's still illegal here in the United States. There are places in the world where it's not, like Thailand is one. It's fully legal. A lot of countries like Canada and UK, they don't bother you if you're just using it. They're only going after like big dealers. But still, it's a concern for a lot of people because you don't want to deal with getting arrested, having to pay fines, having to pay a lawyer, just things like that. It's just a hassle. Okay. When you're natty, you can really feel good about being a better role model, and you can be honest with people. It's hard to, I denied using steroids many times. I lied and said I was natural when people would ask me years ago before I said, F it, I'm just going to tell the truth. Because people will judge you. They will look down on you. They will have a negative view of you if you tell them, if you admit to using steroids. And a lot of people aren't stupid. They can look at someone who's nicely juiced up and they know you're on steroids. So you can say whatever you want. They know the truth. Role model, I don't know. Are any of us aspiring to be role models? But if you are, if you have kids or if you're in a position of authority, like you're a teacher or something like that, you want to be a good role model. You want to be a good role model for kids. It's like recreational drugs. How can you tell your kids, don't smoke pot, don't snort coke, don't do ecstasy, if you used to do all those things? It's hard. I deal with that as my son's a bodybuilder and he's natural, but he knows very well. He's seen all these years of me using. So I can't be a hypocrite and say, you shouldn't use steroids. Steroids are bad. Okay? Drugs are bad. He knows, but it's a good feeling not to have to lie. I don't lie anymore about it. If people ask me about my steroid use, but like, just to give you one example, prior to filming the documentary Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Chris Bell, the producer and director, who I had worked with years before at the American Sports Network, producing content for ESPN, ESPN2. He asked me to be interviewed for that movie, Bigger, Stronger, Faster. And, I would have had to talk about my steroid use. And at that time, I had never gone public with it. I kept it very much a secret from, I would never talk about it in print or on camera, anything like that. So I missed out on an opportunity to be in I consider the greatest documentary about steroids that's ever been made. If he asked me now, actually, he was making a second one and I did a quick interview with him, but I don't think that documentary ever came out. But the point is, if you're not using steroids, you don't have to deny using them because you're not really. And, you'll still get accused, especially if you have a pretty good physique, you'll get accused of being on steroids anyway, but at least in your heart, you'll know you're telling the truth, even if people don't believe you. Reason number 7. Okay. I should have made this apply to women and men, but I know from reading the analytics of my channel, it's like 95% male viewers. Some of you already are husband and or father. Many of you will be in the future. You'll be one or both of those things. Now, I'm not using steroids as an excuse. They don't excuse some of the behaviors I've had in my past with my wife, as far as being inappropriate with other women, things like that, and my kids having a short temper and snapping at them. These are inexcusable things. But the fact of the matter is, when you're on steroids, they do change your emotions. Your hormones do control your emotions. That's why teenagers going through puberty, they're emotional wrecks. They can be like happy one minute, depressed the next minute, angry the next minute. And this is what you go through as a steroid user. You'll go through the so-called roid rage sometimes, where you'll get a lot angry over something than you normally would have because you have all this extra testosterone in your bloodstream. Your sex drive is going to be far greater than it would have been. And if it was already pretty high in the first place, which mine was, it just made it ridiculous. It's all I ever thought about when I was on a heavy cycle. If I was on like a gram of test a week, and throw in some Tren on top of that or something. My God, it's like every woman, almost every woman that walked by was like, oh boy, just ridiculous. And it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to my wife. And the way I was with my kids at times, just losing my shit, just being angry over the stupidest things. It wasn't fair to them. It wasn't fair to them. So if you're natural, you can still be a natural asshole. There's plenty of natural people out there. Plenty of people out there who have never seen a steroid or heard of a steroid that have anger issues, or they cheat on their wives, or they snap at their kids or hit their kids or something. I never hit my kids. But, it's not going to help. If you're trying to be the best husband and father you can be, of course, there are plenty of guys that use steroids that are excellent husbands, excellent fathers. There are many others that, you'll hear a lot of marriages are broken up over the behavior that guys exhibit toward their wives, just their attitude and their demeanor and everything, because these are very powerful hormones and they can change your emotions and your emotional states and the way you react to things and the way you perceive things. They're very, very powerful. One last point, and then I'm going to go to your comments. Reason number 8, to stay natural, steroids are addictive. They are not addictive in the sense of a physical addiction, as you would see with something like opiates or nicotine or alcohol. So they don't fit the classic definition of addiction in that respect. However, they're extremely psychologically addictive in the way they make you look and feel, meaning that once you start on steroids and you see that body change and you start getting all this attention from people telling you how great you look and your lifts in the gym are going up, you never want it to stop. And especially when you go off, as you're gonna, you can't stay on all the time. If you do, any health problems you're gonna eventually have, they're gonna accelerate if you never take breaks from steroids. Then you lose those gains, you lose the muscle size, you lose the strength, at least part of it, and you get depressed about that. You're like, shit, where'd my shoulders go? That was the one thing I always noticed, ironically, when I would start a cycle. About a week and a half, 2 weeks in, I'd look in the mirror at my delts and they would be much, much fuller and rounder. I was like, yes. Then when I would go off, that was the first thing I noticed again, was my delts would shrink down. That's why they have the saying natty delts. It's relating to the fact that a lot of people see the big difference. I see that more in women on steroids versus natural women. The delts are just like night and day. Women on enhanced women's delts are usually just 2-3 times bigger and fuller and rounder. All right, so those are my 8 reasons. Let's go to the phones because we are live. Let's hear what you guys have to say. I always like to hear stuff. Okay. Built to laugh. Reason number 1, they all look like shit once they go off it. Yeah, I mean, some people, it's a very common problem with guys who have no natural base. They started steroids pretty much from the time they started lifting. They have no natural base, so that means there's no permanent muscle built. So when they go off steroids, they lose almost all of it. And a lot of times, because they're so reliant on the steroids, they might try to train for a little while off steroids and they see no point. They're like, man, I look like shit. I'm weak. F this. And they just quit training. They quit bodybuilding. I've seen that so many times, guys, so many times. Built to laugh. Also TRT isn't off it. So fuck their genetic talk BS. Dominic Walker got good genetics. He does have good genetics. He actually does. The reason I say that is because we have many, many thousands of people out there taking steroids, do we not? If steroids were the determining factor in how physique looked and genetics weren't really that important, they didn't play that big a role, we'd have thousands and thousands of guys walking around looking exactly like Nick Walker or better. And we don't. Nick had the right bone structure, the right muscle bellies. Yeah, you can't go by how people's parents look. Sometimes genetics skip a generation or two, and they weren't trying to be bodybuilders. And actually, his dad, Lou, I've stood next to him and I could see certain things with the structure and everything. Like Lou, I think he was a lifter in his earlier years when he was younger, and he was pretty good. Someone like Carlos Thomas Jr., if you ever see his dad, you could see exactly where all that came from, even though his dad's not a hardcore bodybuilder and geared up or anything, but you can see the frame, the wide shoulders, the thickness that the guy still has in his chest, his shoulders, his back. His dad, and I don't even know if his dad trains anymore. Let's see. Is TRT natty biggest Momo? I guess not really. I mean, not really. You're putting something in your body. So you are taking artificial. I'm on TRT now. I'm smaller. I'm a good 15 pounds smaller than I would be if I was on a cycle. But I'm just on TRT. It's enough for me to maintain. I'm only about 212 right now, and that's like an off season. If I dieted down now, like when I dieted down, when I competed in the past, all geared up, I'd be between 201, 205 with striated glutes. If I went down to striated glutes now, I bet I'd only be about 180, 185 the most, something like that. So it's a big difference. It's a big difference. So TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, that's given to people by a doctor or a TRT clinic, like I use Frontline Alternative in Texas. People whose bodies no longer produce testosterone in sufficient quantities. A lot of former steroid users go on it because they have that, what's the medical term for it? It's hypogonadism, anabolic steroid-induced hypogonadism. So ASIH. So if you use steroids long enough, you shut down your body's ability to produce it forever and you need to go on it. So NATTY would be to be completely off everything, and you'd have very, very low testosterone levels, and you'd be feeling depressed and tired and weak, and you'd be hating life. And I'm not going to live my life like that. Macho Desperado, NATTY since 1996. I'm 43 and feel better now than ever. Oh, so wow, since 1996, if you're 43 now, you must have been a teenager when you used them. I'm not very good at math. So 1996 was 28 years ago. Yeah, you were a kid when you started using them? I don't know. Mustangs and meatballs. Stay off if you've never done it. I know in your mind you'll deal with consequences tomorrow, but newsflash, tomorrow will come. Yeah, I mean, that's all of us when we're young. We don't think about consequences, especially long term. When you're a 16, 17, 18, 20-year-old, when you're that young, you can't even imagine ever being 40. That's so old. That's so far away. That's like 1,000 years away. You can't comprehend that day is ever going to come, and that, you might have consequences, health consequences 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line as a result of something that you did as a very young man. But it happens all the time. Kalyan. What's up, Kalyan? Yes, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, Kalyan is the guy that was responsible for me getting Chad Nichols on the show. He's the one that kept reminding me until I finally did it. Built to laugh. Natural 240 look better than a steroid user. I know once they go off. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. You can be proud because these steroid users, you'll see them every day in the gym. Like my son gets really down on himself because our gym has a lot of people on gear, a lot of people. And, I think steroid use among youngsters now is at epidemic rates. It's higher than it's ever been, thanks to social media. And they see all these posts glorifying trend on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube channels. But, I've seen these people come and go. I've seen them quit. I've seen them get sick. I've seen them come and go. And if you're natural and you stay consistent, you're never going to have to worry about going off and looking like a shadow of your former self. Because that's a terrible thing when people say, geez, what happened? You quit lifting and you're still lifting, but you're not on gear anymore. But in your heart of hearts, you look nothing like that now. You've lost 30 to 50% of the mass that you were carrying on gear. John Stewart, not the comedian, 1985, natural Mr. America, now at 73 years old. Excellent. Admonish your enormous, I think you meant to say admire your enormous impact. No. Admonish is like to say shame on you. Even if I had gone some organic, vegan, non-GMO adding, to be natural and stay nutritious high at all times is key to success. I think you're trying to talk more about the diet that you follow. I'm not really sure. Cody Jolly, thanks for this, Ron. I'm 33. NATTY, been lifting for 15 years. Social media makes TRT tempting, but I like knowing what adjustments to my diet, training, and sleep improve method. So, Cody, I'm wondering, when you say that, are you tempted to go on actual TRT because you have low testosterone levels? Or I think social media has made that term TRT sort of lose its true meaning. It's testosterone replacement therapy for people that are deficient in testosterone. Either some people are born that way, they're hypogonadic, their bodies never make enough. Others lose the ability to produce testosterone, either through steroid use themselves, steroid abuse, or there are certain illnesses and conditions that will lower a man's testosterone, certain medications that they take and things for other illnesses. So I'm not really sure which one you mean there, because it's TRT has sort of been become a bastardized term that people don't use correctly anymore. I'm a stickler for correct terminology. Built to laugh. Over 17 years of lifting and shredded 200. I look like a Greek god. Just don't want the fame. Well, not many people are going to be famous anyway. Built to laugh. I'm just curious from your avatar. if you've seen Joker Joya Du, I don't know how you say it, the new Joker movie with Lady Gaga, and if you feel it's as horrible as everyone seems to say it is, I'm curious because I love Lady Gaga, and I could probably watch her, just stare at a tree for 2 hours. Dave Thomas, to be honest, around 12 years ago, I had to stop. Hemoglobin count was off the scale. Luckily, after having 2 pints of blood removed for a few weeks, it returned to normal. Thank God. Yeah, Dave, good point. A lot of people, a very common side effect of steroid use is your red blood cell count, your hematocrit gets very high. That's why a lot of gear users, if they're smart and they check their hematocrit and they know it's going to be high, they donate blood every month or so, or every couple of weeks or whatever, or they just phlebotomize. I mean, there was Dr. T that I do the videos with every Sunday, Dr. George Touliatos in Greece. When he was on gear, and I think even when he's not, he tends, just from TRT, he tends to have very high hematocrit. And I remember a video where he was just taking out his own blood and presumably just throwing it away, flushing it down the toilet or down the drain, because if you have a very high red blood cell count, your blood gets thicker, you have higher blood pressure, and it's bad for, it's a risk for heart disease and heart attacks. And we had legit gear back then. You just walk into French pharmacy and away you go. Yeah, I should have made that one of my reasons, but it doesn't apply to so many people because very few of us are old enough to know but even by the time I started using gear, I had already missed out on that whole time when there was legit gear that you could get easily, like anywhere. Like in the Arnold days and the pumping iron days, there wasn't a huge selection of steroids, but everything was real. Everything was fully dosed, legit, made by actual pharmaceutical companies. If they were taking D-bol, it was made by Ciba. If they were taking test, it was made by like Upjohn or Lilly or whatever, Deca. These are things they never had to worry about the product being anything other than what it said on the bottle. They never had to worry about heavy metals like mercury in it or bacteria. They never had to worry because everything was from pharma grade. It was from pharmaceuticals. I don't think they didn't even have to have the phrase or the term pharma grade back then because there was nothing else. After steroids became illegal in 1988 with after the Seoul Olympics, they became a banned substance, and they became the FDA classified them as an illegal drug. That's when things went underground, and you started getting these underground steroids and counterfeits. And as a lot of you guys know from using steroids yourself, a lot of times you don't know what you're taking. You can buy these things like William Llewellyn's Roid Test Kit. That'll tell you if the steroid you're using is what it's supposed to be. So you could put some drops of primobolan on it, and it'll tell you if that's primobolan or if it's actually Deca or Test or something like that. It still doesn't tell you the potency. It doesn't tell you if it's actually 200 mg per mil or is it 100 or is it 50 or is it, it'll say it wouldn't be 0 because it does detect that there is a drug in there. But I mean, the late George Peterson III, the bull, God bless his soul, in his autopsy report, he thought he was supposedly on something like 4 or 5 different steroids, but all they found in his system was testosterone, meaning that everything he was taking, whatever it was being sold to him as, whether it was primobolan or whatever, Winstrol, it was all just tests that had been labeled by some unscrupulous steroid manufacturer / dealer. And that happens a lot. There are some honest guys out there in that world that make the underground steroids that do want to make a quality product, but there's a lot of them that are out for a quick buck, and they don't care if you're going to get sick. They don't care if you get no results. They don't care. They're just after the money. So Macho Desperado, and that's a problem I got with the dark market. You don't know what you're going to get. Yeah, it's like Forrest Gump says. Mom always said, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And the problem is worse for women. As guys, we're taking male hormones that we're men. It's okay. It's not okay, but you know what I'm saying. A lot of women have been messed up over the years by taking what they thought were the quote-unquote safer steroids for women. So Anavar is one that almost all the women use. That's the number one steroid that women use, all the way from bikini up to open bodybuilding, every division. That's a very safe steroid compared to things that are more androgenic, like D-bol, like Anadrol, that will change their voice. They'll lose their hair. They'll grow more hair. Get all kinds of zits. Problem is, Anavar, raw powder for Anavar is very expensive compared to something like D-bol. It's probably like 10 times more expensive. So if you're making steroids and you don't care, you will sell people Anavar pills that are actually D-bol pills, and you're making a monster profit versus much less profit if you were actually making it with Anavar powder. And it was genuine Anavar. Primobolan, same thing. That's another one of the quote unquote safer steroids for women. But a lot of times, these same unscrupulous underground manufacturers and dealers, they will make batches with testosterone and label it as primobolan, and they're making a massive profit because primobolan is much, much more expensive, as a lot of you guys who have used it know, much more expensive than testosterone. But it's going to take those women's side effects into the stratosphere. Their voices change forever. They lose their hair. They grow hair. It's just a nasty thing. That guy 6, I stay natural, so my I think he wants to say penis will work, and the muscles I build I keep. Erectile dysfunction. So that happens typically when you go off and your testosterone crashes. If you're doing the right PCP, post-cycle therapy, there are ways to avoid that. And as long as you manage your testosterone, erectile dysfunction really shouldn't be a problem. But like you said, you're not screwing with, if you stay natural, you're not messing with that process at all. You don't have to worry about your testosterone crashing and your estrogen going through the roof, because you're not doing anything chemically to your body that's going to have those kind of crazy effects. So correct. You are correct. That guy 6. He continues. I did try a test 8 years ago, 1 cycle, 2 months. Didn't want to go that. You one and done, rare. You are one of the few. So props to you, that guy 6. I can't think of too many people I've ever known, ever, in all these years. And I've known thousands and thousands of people who went on gear over the years, either closely or just as acquaintances. And very, very few of them ever did just 1 cycle. Very few. I planned on doing just 1 cycle and ended up doing, I don't know. I wish I had kept better records. I really do. I have no idea how many cycles I did. If I had to take a wild guess, probably like 100 cycles, probably some. Jayhawk, thank you. Appreciate that. Never lose, just blast and cruise. Yeah, I mean, but then you're still on, that means you're always on steroids, which, it's either that and you don't have a lot of options. Once you're on steroids, you can either stop them completely and hope your hormonal axis recovers and you can make testosterone again eventually, which if you're a young guy and you haven't been using them that long, you'll probably be able to do that. You'll probably get everything back to normal. If you're an older guy, maybe not so much. And if you've been on them a while, and the other option. So blast and cruise is really just using larger amounts and then bridging it, smaller amounts between. So maybe a 12-week cycle, 12, 16 week. And then, I always believed in the early years I used to go off like 12 weeks on, 12 weeks off. I followed that rule. I like that number 12. I don't know why, over and over again. But a lot more people will do things like, just bridge it now. So if they're on 2 grams, 2,000 milligrams of combined steroids for say 12 weeks or 16 weeks, they'll bridge that with anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. I don't know too many people that stay off for more than 12 weeks of more of a TRT dose, lower dose. It's not true TRT because that would be for most people like between 100 and 250 milligrams of test and nothing else. But a lot of guys, their bridge cycles, their cruise cycles will be something like 400 milligrams of test and 400 milligrams of DECA or something. Although we do recommend, Dr. T always talks about using twice as much test as DECA to avoid the issues with the prolactin. CH, Chad, is that what you're trying to say? I don't know. Did you mention the risk to fertility? No, I didn't. That's a good point, Jayhawk, MBA. Some obviously had no problems with having children. The greatest thing may cost more money to diagnose, resolve marital stress. Yeah, I didn't think of that. More and more people are choosing not to have kids these days. So that's their choice. That's their right. I'm not going to say you need to have children, but I personally, my kids are 30 and 25 years old now. So I've been a dad for a long time at age 55 now. I can't imagine my life without those kids. They are when you hear people say that my kids are the best things ever happened to me. And even when people have gone through these horrible, bitter divorces and they hate their ex-wife or whatever, their ex-husband, they still say, at least my kids came out of that marriage and being with that person. So I don't regret it completely, because if I was never married to that person or I never met that person, I wouldn't have these awesome kids. So yeah, that's a good point. Dr. O'Connor, the anabolic doc, he specialized, still does, in helping former steroid users and sometimes current steroid users get pregnant or get their wife or girlfriend pregnant. Through, we talk about it on Dr. T show all the time. It's usually HCG and not HMB. That's something. What's the other one? HCG and the other one. It's not HMB. It sounds like that. Anyway, there are drug cocktails to restore your fertility, but if you never took steroids in the first place, you wouldn't have to worry about that. And a lot of people, you might not even think of ever wanting to be a dad or anything like that when you're like 20, 25 years old. But say you're 30, 35 years old, you meet this great woman, and I'm putting this in just heterosexual couple terms just for simplicity. You can apply this to any same-sex, different, whatever couple you want. It's fine. I'm just using this as an example. You might meet somebody later on down the road in your life, maybe when you're 40, and that person really wants kids, or by that time, maybe you really want kids. Your friends, your family, maybe you've got nephews and nieces, and you're like, wow, these kids are really, I'd like to be a dad. So you never know. Your feelings about that might change, and you might meet somebody you might meet a woman that really wants to be a mom, and you don't want to have to be going through all these very expensive fertility treatments, IVF and all that. Kalyan, the wonderful interview you did with Chad has been discussed amongst a lot of top whales on the podcast. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, they didn't tag me. They didn't tag me. I saw that Nick Trigilli used the old interview I did with Sergio that was months and months ago. He just brought that up again. Thank you, Oliver. Toby Freestyle Raps, 25. I was 6 foot 250, 600-pound squat, 405 bench, 715 dead, 185 strict overhead press for 10 reps, 180 weighted chin up. Natty, now 32, 315 bench, 405 front squat any day of the week. So, yeah, I'm not going to say it's all genetics, but genetically, some people can be so impressive naturally. And I think there are a lot of them out these days, they're never going to even know that because they'll never give themselves a chance to see what they could have achieved and accomplished naturally. There's a good example at my gym. There's this kid, Zach, that's a friend of my son. He's natural, but he's a freak. He's about 6 foot. He's about 240, lean, great genetics, just structure, the muscle bellies. He looks like he's on a bunch of gear. I know he's not. I've talked to him a few times, and I know the gear look, believe me. And he never changes. His physique is very consistent where I see gear. I know what all the telltale signs, guys, all the red flags for gear use. Point being, though, if this kid had started steroids from day one, he would never know how good he was going to be. And he's very good. They're going to watch a natural pro show here tomorrow in Boston. And I think that kid, Zach, I think he could be one of those great natural pros if he stays it. There's no reason for him to go on drugs. He looks fantastic. He looks better naturally, this kid, Zach. Wish I had a picture of him. Than 99. Do I have his Instagram? I think I do. What's his name? I should give this kid credit. I mean, it's mom and he put in the work though. I mean, his mom and dad, they might have given him the genes, but they didn't. No, that's not him. No. Yeah, I don't know his Instagram, so I can't show you. But I hope I made my point there. Maintaining 6 foot 1 inch, 260 easy nowadays. Mostly muscle, not like I'm 6 foot jacked. Well, I mean, you're a little older now. How old did you say it was? You didn't say how old you were. So I have 480 front squat, 25 and nose jacked. I was actually very strong naturally. I got stronger, don't get me wrong, but I was squatting, for me, it was a lot of weight. I was squatting like 405 for a few good reps when I was around 25 and natural. I was really good at dumbbell pressing for some reason. I could do like the 130s for incline, flat, overhead 120s any day of the week for shoulders. Sometimes I could do the 130s for a couple shit reps. Kalyan again. Serrano, as a veteran, feel it's mandatory for every bodybuilding coach, let alone amateur level, shouldn't be allowed to coach proper certifications. Yeah, I mean, but what are you going to do? You can't put the genie back in the bottle. We have coaching has become this big cottage industry. Everyone and their grandmother's a coach. Yeah, you shouldn't be able to guide people through taking all these different chemicals with no training, with no medical knowledge of what can happen, especially things like diuretics. You got teenagers out there that are coaching and they're telling people how to, giving them protocols with diuretics in it for the end, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. And people are going to get hurt, but it's too late. It's an unregulated industry, and because it's off the grid, it's not anything, because there's no certification needed, or there's no one to answer to. There's no authority, like there's no medical board. There's nobody that they have to worry about taking their license away or anything. It's like the Wild West out there. But I do agree. UGLs are producing farmer grade gear now. They say most is Genoshek for testing. Okay, yeah, I'm sure. I know there's some good underground gear out there. Of course there is. There's a lot of bad gear out there too. And if you didn't do the testing, thank you for saying Januszek. You would never know. Toby, been natural for 18.5 years. Trained since I was 14. Was 5'9", 145. Now 32, 6'1", 260. Even me natural 20 years ago, I still have more progress to make. Yeah, see, that's one thing I sort of regret is I hopped on gear at just turned 27 a couple months before. And, I had justified it to myself and I had convinced myself I had hit my ultimate natural limit. I was never going to get any bigger than that. And looking back, I'm thinking, you would have. You were just being impatient. I don't know how much more mass I would have put on naturally. Of course, there was going to be a limit. But I'm sure I didn't get to it. I'm sure the progress, the gains were very slow. And so I was just very discouraged. That's why I hopped on the gear. It was just out of impatience. And I wanted to see some more gains now. I didn't want to wait. And in the back of my head, I justified that by saying, there are no more gains coming. This is it. You're never going to get any bigger. And now I really look back and think, okay, I was 27. I just turned 27 when I hopped on. Realistically, I probably could have put on eventually. Maybe it would have taken me another 10 years to put on another 10 pounds of muscle, but that would have looked so good on me. I look better naturally because my proportions were better. My waist was really small. My arms were in proportion to my legs. When I hopped on steroids, my legs blew up. They got huge. My chest got huge. Shoulders got huge. Traps got huge. My mid-back didn't really have much. That took me a lot of years, but my arms never really got a whole lot bigger. They certainly didn't keep pace with my legs. So I had a better physique naturally because the proportions were better. Things had a better flow to them. I had a better overall shape when I was natural, even though I was a lot smaller. And had I stayed natural and put on, even if it was only another 10 pounds. So let's say I would have been 5'8", 190, 195 at the most, eventually ripped. I still would have looked very good. I could have been a decent natural pro. I don't think I would have been like the greatest natural pro in the world. Of course not. But I would have been in some natural pro shows, and I think I could have placed because I was always really conditioned and I was a really good poser. Martin versus, what do I think of the Martin win? If I'd see, I told Martin had too much muscle. Yeah, I mean, I agreed with it. I had Martin winning the whole time. I thought it was very close the first day, the judging day, last Saturday, because Martin was off. He was sweating. He was holding a lot of water because he had pulled his hamstring early on in the judging while hitting a pose, and that really screwed him up. But by the second day, his color was better. He wasn't sweating. To me, he was a clear winner. Oliver, 12 weeks in, 12 weeks off, something wax on, wax off. Yeah, 12 on. I just like, maybe it was just the simplicity of it. We believed back then, I don't know where it came from, but we all sort of subscribed to this idea, time off should equal time on. That was just the way we did it. I'm talking back in the 90s. And, I talked to people for years. Before I started using steroids, I was around a lot of steroid users. I was out in Los Angeles. I was working with the pros and everything. So I talked to them all about it. I had a little bit of information, not enough. I really should have done more research. There was no internet yet. But that was a very standard way of using gear back then was you'd be on for X amount of time and then you'd go off. And I didn't even do PCT. I think I would use like Clomid pills. I mean, it was like a half-ass PCT. I wasn't that educated, guys. I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. Oh, that's the same thing. Best way to make youngsters realize it's not worth it. Unfortunately, the only thing that ever teaches us anything is to go through it ourselves. Like, you can't tell someone to stop ego lifting and use shit form. They're not going to listen to you until they get hurt. Then they're forced to clean up their form, use better form, warm up more, do things like that because they don't want that to happen again. So it's hard for people to, you could try to point out really good natural bodybuilders who you genuinely believe are natural. I know there's fake natties out there, but there are plenty of really legit natties out there with very good physiques. They're not 270 pounds ripped. They don't have 22-inch arms, but they look damn good. Damn good. Sean, answers to that. Better to educate in regards to them and not attempt to scare them away. Yeah, scare tactics never worked. That was like that old 1980s commercial that used to run an anti-drug campaign. Said, "This is your brain." It was an egg, and then they drop it into a frying pan. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And like, that's an egg in a frying pan. That's not my brain. So yeah, scare tactics. Start of the show. Do you regret starting gear? I do and I don't, Deng Tui, Australia. I do and I don't. I mean, had I never started, it would always be a what if. What would I have looked like? A lot of natties, and I was one of them, had this delusion this crazy idea that a few cycles and I'd be like Rich Gaspari, Lee Haney, all the guys I idolized in my early years. I thought I would just be this massive freak, and I never was a massive freak. You know, I was the heaviest off season was like 248, and that was fat. On stage in really great shape, best I ever was like 208. So I was never a massive guy, but it was about 20 pounds more muscle than I had previous to using steroids. So for me, it was a big difference. Do I regret? You know, thank God, knock on some wood, I've had very good luck with my health. A lot of people I've known have not. I've lost friends. I've lost training partners. We've seen all the deaths in the industry over the past few years. I'm sure the jab has had something to do with that. It's got to play a factor in a lot of those deaths, but still, we've lost a lot of bodybuilders. So I've been fortunate. A lot of people won't be as fortunate as I was, sadly. But do I regret? I do and I don't. I struggle with that question all the time. For the wisdom, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Never stop growing. Well, that's a great reason. I mean, I was probably still growing myself, Melvin, but it wasn't fast enough for me. I was just being impatient. I was being greedy. I look at it now. I look back and think I was making progress, because 25 was when I was showing all those pictures from my show when I was 25. By the time I started gear a couple of years later, I was definitely a little bit bigger. It wasn't dramatic. And if I had just made those steady, smaller gains year after year, it would have added up to, I really think I had another 10, 12 pounds of muscle that I could have built, which would have made me look a lot better. And I just didn't do it. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking great and you're satisfied with what you see in the mirror, obviously there's no reason. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Machines versus free weights. I use both. I think beginners should use mostly free weights. When you're building your base, you want to use a lot of good compound movements, things that work a lot of muscle groups and you can go heavy on. The bench press, squat, deadlift, military press, barbell row, skull crushers, barbell curls, dips, chin-ups, the basics. As you get a little more advanced and you've got some good base of size, then you add in more machines, more cable work, more machine work. And as you get older and your joints are arthritic and deteriorated like mine are, that's when you're forced to start using a lot more machines than you would have in your younger years. But yeah, Nancy Reagan, she was they made her in charge of the war on drugs, not the war on drugs, but like the publicity campaign to keep kids off drugs, of all people. Yeah, I mean, it's different for everybody, Sean. I think 5 to 10 years it's a good range. I'd say within 5 to 10 years at the most, you've probably gained all the muscle naturally you're going to gain, or most of it, I should say. So 10 years of training, like I said, I started out lifting. I was 95 pounds. When I went on gear, my off-season weight was I was like 225, but it was 225, 230, but it was chubby, very chubby, not lean at all. But like I said, I think I had gained about probably 80%. I had been training a long time at that point. Even if I gained 90% of everything I was going to gain by that point, I think the other 10% would have equated to about 10 pounds, 12 pounds. Natty here, I want to take 500 tests during the train for 6 weeks. You think I can get back my natural T after? If you do one cycle, yeah, you can get it back. But the problem is most people don't do one cycle. Most of us who use steroids, you're so pleased with the effects and the attention that you get, especially. And we didn't even have social media back then. The only attention we got was in real life. People at the gym, walking around, at the mall, the beach, whatever, in a classroom. But now you can put your pictures and videos up on TikTok, Instagram, all these platforms, and thousands. You could even have millions of people telling you how great you look every damn day. So it's going to be tough to go back after that. To report, yes. Yeah. How long does it take? It's going to get your natural T levels back. It's probably going to, if you're only on 6 weeks, you probably get it back within 6 to 12 weeks. Suggestions for growing forearms, biggest Momo. I mean, you can do the standard exercises. Big forearms, it really comes down to where your insertions are. So my insertions are here. Someone like a Lee Priest, his insertions are up here by the wrist. The same with calves. So this is like a calf. If you can imagine, this is your knee. If your calf inserts here and the rest is tendon, you're never going to have a huge calf. Someone like a Flex Lewis or the late Mike Matarazzo, their calves went way up toward their ankle, like an inch or two below their above the ankle. Those people naturally always had huge, huge calves. Of course, you know, you're doing it all based on what you post. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, impatience and a lot of people getting into gear, even now, even though we have so much information available, so many guys just jump in with no research because they just can't wait to start. Natural body's a miracle. Is treat it right, feed it right, keep it well maintained, oiled. Will do well in old age. For snags will tend to have a longer lifespan. Agree with all that, Raphael. Agree with all that. Gaining muscle naturally will give you extra muscle on gear. Well, you'll have more. So if you're 150 pounds naturally and you get on gear, let's say within a year, you could probably get to, I don't know, 180. I'm just throwing wacky numbers out there. If you were already 180 before you started, if you had put on more muscle, you're going to have more muscle on gear. We've seen guys, and I know I'm going to get some backlash, but like Ronnie Coleman and Kai Green, they were competing for several years naturally, and they built an amazing natural base. They're both genetically gifted beyond belief as well. Let's not forget that. But they had so much natural base that when they went on, it was like kaboom. You know, Ronnie won his pro card at 215 pounds at 5'11". 5'11", 215 does not sound very big, does it? And eventually he would be competing at 296 at the highest. So same thing with Kai. Kai turned pro at around 212, 215. He's shorter. He says 5'9". I want to say 5'8". Kai eventually would be competing around 275, 280. So the more muscle you have without the gear, obviously it's going to add astronomical amounts on top of that to gear. Where it was on front squat, or do seated barbell. Okay. Yeah, I squatted 700 naturally. It wasn't a great rep. So front squat, the most I ever did, and I wasn't natural. I never did front squats back in my natural years. I never even thought to do the exercise. I did 405 for 8 or 10 reps with Ronnie Coleman yelling at me right behind me at Metroflex Gym in February 2005. Overhead press. So I used to do 315 on that all the time. I was very good at overhead pressing. I don't know why. I couldn't flat bench with a barbell for shit. I was never very good at that. But for some reason, and I would do a good arch. It was almost like a high incline the way I did it because I had a hell of an arch, but I could do 315. I did that many times. I even did that behind the neck a few times. Macho Desperado was 125 and 96. 2 meals per day, 260 plus. Well, I couldn't eat 2 meals a day. I'd be very hungry. Well, you've more than doubled your body weight. That's awesome. Stay natty, folks. You will impress physique. Agree with that. And that's the thing, EP. It's not going to be as impressive, as freaky as a big juiced up physique, but to the average person, you're going to look better because they won't look at you with disgust. If that even matters to you, maybe it doesn't matter, but people will see a great natural physique and nobody's going to be like, ugh, that's disgusting. They'll be like, wow, you look great, because you'll still have a natural look. You'll still look sort of streamlined and athletic and like you can move. Whereas someone who's got extreme amounts of mass that you can only achieve with the use of anabolics, they look like they can't move. They look like a chemistry experiment. I'm not against using gear wise from not making money. I mean, Dorian Yates has said many times, if you're not competing to be Mr. Olympia or something, there's no reason you should be using steroids. That's everyone's matter of opinion. I can't tell grown-ass men what to do with their lives and their bodies. And, is it worth it? That's something everyone has to sort of figure out on their own. Is it worth it? The risks involved, there are risks. Is it worth it to me to have these bits? A risk-benefit ratio that you sort of have to work out in your own mind. Best numbers on front squats and barbell. Okay, I just said that. Yeah, as far as squats with no spotter at all, best I ever did was, I wasn't into like singles, but I used to do 4 1/4. So what's that? 455. I could get like 10 reps with that. 10 really good reps on my own. Ronnie and Kai, they're like MJ and so yeah, they were very, very gifted. Circumstances can dictate whether you use gear or not as well. And commercial diver using gear is not conducive. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I don't think gear would really be helpful for. Good stuff. Definitely give you big muscles. Front squats, 4 5, net squat. Yeah, I was strong in a few things. Some things I was never good at, but for some lifts I was really good at for whatever reason, just different leverages. I don't know. All right, guys, I have been on this almost an hour, so I appreciate all you watching. I'm going to take off. It's dark, but I'm still going to walk my boy, Branch the Buckles, my beautiful pit bull pup. So thank you all for watching. Appreciate you all chiming in and hope you have an excellent weekend. What's left of it. I will talk to you all later. Peace.